Scene one, Apple, take one.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shane Borza. Welcome to another episode of Film Notes, the show where I talk to people in the industry about the industry so we can learn not only what the different roles are, but how people get into them and what they mean. So I have a new friend, which I've actually been corresponding with for a while now named Kelly, and we're excited to have her join us. So to officially introduce her, it's Kelli McNeil-Yellen, and she's both a filmmaker who does a lot of different roles there, but also is a marketer and works in PR at her own firm, which is KLA Media. And I'm excited to have her talk a little bit about how she got in the industry and all the different things she does. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It is, I'm on the other side of the table for once. And it's nice to finally chat with you. Like you said, we've been going back and forth for a while, and I found your podcast to be, interesting and insightful, and I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. And if people are new to the show, we were just talking before we got on air, the last couple episodes have all been direct from you. And so we are ending the year very strongly with like a KLA media representation. But before we get into some of the things you're doing at like the PR firm, how did you get in industry? Like, how did that start? I know you did some acting. Is that where it began, or were you writing first? Usually I find people, even if they have a lot of different hats that they're wearing, like one of those is the spark.
Yeah. I actually, I think I knew what I wanted to do from a very, very young age. I think I knew in high school that I wanted a career in entertainment, and I was in theater and speech, and I was competing on the circuits. I grew up in Texas, and I started to rank nationally, in the NFL and the UIL, which are the speech and theater competitions. And by the time my junior year rolled around, I was ranking at a high level in state. I was taking a second, third place in those competitions, and USC's theater department started recruiting me, which was very flattering. And I did not think I could possibly afford that school or get into it. But I managed to get a very generous financial aid package from them. And they basically gave me almost a full ride to go to USC. So I moved out here with nothing really. I didn't know anybody. And I had, maybe $1,000 in my bank account, trying to figure things out. But as somebody who had to pay their way through college, I did work full time as well, and I worked a variety of jobs, in sales and bartending. As I'm trying to, do theater and be in productions. And my senior year, I minored in visual media and communication, so I was studying at the business school and at the comm school as well. And my senior year, I got very, very sick, and I could no longer bartend. I had to find some sort of a paid job that would allow me to make money, but also work at a desk. And I took a paid internship at a mom and pop PR firm. And that kind of just really set me off on this course that I didn't even know existed. And I will say that, for a number of years, I juggled, trying to be a creative, because most everybody who works in a creative capacity has to have some other kind of a job. And there's nothing to be ashamed of about that. That is okay. Most authors that have day jobs as well. So just don't ever be ashamed of what you do. I was resentful of it for many, many years, because I was like, I just want to be writing full time, or I just want to be, acting full time, or making films full time, until it came time to make my own film. And you had mentioned this before we got on this interview together. Yes, my husband Alexander is my producing partner and the director of our film Garuma, which Peter Fairley was the executive producer of. It hit the festival circuit last year, and it is now available on platforms. But, once we got to a certain point, we thought we had everything ready to go. And then, of course, 2020 happened, and the bottom fell out, and all of the paths that we've been working on, for the last couple of years to make this film happen had been completely washed away. So we started from scratch. And it wasn't until I realized that the landscape of film distribution had changed so drastically. We weren't going to get the acquisition that I had hoped for. We weren't going to get, that sort of platforming. And we'd done so much work, community building, and, you know, using my skill set, you know, in marketing and PR and audience building and advertisement and crowdfunding and brand sponsorships and all of the things that you really need to do to run a business, which basically when you're making a film, you are making a business from scratch each and every time. So if you look at it like that, it can be helpful. But once we got to the point where it was like, okay, we actually have to carry this film much further down the line than we thought we did, I really dug my heels in. And I was like, okay, I have to be the driver behind this launch. I have to handle the press. I have to handle the theatrical engagement. I have to do all of it. And I did it. And it was hard. It was an extremely steep learning curve, but we were successful at it. And because of that, once that happened, I started to have a number of filmmakers come up to me after that process. I mean, and I will say that the process is still going on because we haven't even hit our AVOD window yet. So that's going to be a whole other thing. But filmmakers came to me and they said, could you offer me some guidance and experience in this? And I think what sets me apart from other PR firms or marketing firms that do the same work that I do is that I'm actually a filmmaker. And I know not only how much everyone is invested in their projects, but just how pulling at one thread can trigger something off down the line. So, you know, if you're putting your film up, you know, on the internet, well, that means that, you know, you may not have an exclusive down the road. You know, how can you maximize the use of your trailer? Things like that. So I know that's a very long answer to what was a very simple question, but that's more or less the journey of what got me here.
Well, first, I love when people give a long answer because it's usually very interesting and they go to places I never would have thought to ask about. But the other thing that I'd always, and I'm sure you know this, but it's because there's no one way. Like if you ask 100 people in the industry, you get 100 answers of how did you get in, how did you get started, how did you end up where you are? And quite often it is a long, kind of complicated, or at least when we look back. Like, oh, I'm a Z. Well, how did I get here? Well, I was A, and then I went to B, and then went to C. And when we realized, like, oh, there's a lot of different steps and things that have to happen or not happen so that I can end up where I am. Quite often when we're young and in college, we're just doing whatever we possibly can get, you know, and there isn't necessarily a step-by-step process. We might have like a long-term goal of like being a filmmaker, you know, in the future, but we don't necessarily know how that goes. So I'm always fascinated when those things come together, and especially being able to tell the story that quickly. Like, let me condense all this stuff down.
Just 20 years into that.
So a couple of things. So some parallels here. It's funny. So I came to filmmaking as like a second career. And I moved to LA, went to USC at the film, because I had a degree, so I wanted to get a master's. So I was touring the campus. I was like, this is amazing. I'd love to go. I got an interview. I sat down and they were like, so basically between living fees here in the city and tuition and like all the lab fees and all the, it's like, you know, $50,000 to $100,000 a year program. And the master's is a 3-year program. And I was like, so I went to Sydney, Australia, went to film school and got a 2-year degree for like 40 grand. So, but I've been on that campus. It's an amazing program and it has such a hub. So another parallel, you talked about like moving from Texas to LA and be like, I don't know anybody. Well, the problem with me going to film school in Australia is I came back to LA and like, I don't know anybody. All my contacts are in Australia. So there is a lot of that, like starting the connections or everything from scratch. Yeah. And I think that's maybe a way to tie in what you were talking about, like every film is its own company. Because if you're starting a new business, it's like from scratch. You don't have any customers, you don't have any clients, you have no word of mouth, like nobody knows that. So I wonder if there's a way to talk a little bit about any one of those versions. Was like, how did you start from scratch on like getting yourself out there when you were starting in the industry, and maybe how can that parallel, because it is a lot of those same skill sets, to like growing a project from scratch and saying like, hey, we just finished this film, nobody knows about it. Yeah. How do we get people to know about it?
You know, it's interesting, and it sort of touches on the issue that a lot of filmmakers are having right now, in that, you know, you're not going to get an acquisition from one of the streamers. They pivoted from, the 2010s where they were doing a bunch of acquisitions. They were building their catalogs. They were looking for independent films to acquire because they didn't have the production model set up. But now they do. So they're making the films in-house. So a lot of filmmakers are like, well, crap, what do we do? So you really do need to, I always tell people that I work with that there is no skill set that you will ever learn that will not be invaluable to you at some point. And I mean this, whether or not I know ASL. I grew up learning ASL, and our film, stars two leads with disabilities in a narrative not about overcoming disability. ASL was sort of my entry into the disability community, and we built that community from the ground up. People realized, like, okay, these guys are they're trying to tell a positive story, authentically cast. We found that angle and we built the community around it. So, in that regard, we sort of reverse engineered what we were trying to do. And I realized that's a bit of a deviation from, going from an acquisition to community building. But that's sort of what filmmakers have to do right now, is you need to really look at the space. Where does your film fit in, and how can you reverse engineer that audience so they're part of it and they're invested in it? I'm working with a film right now, just on sort of a distribution, consultation level, and they've been out for a while, but they haven't really invested the time into building the audience, and they're running into issues now because they don't quite know what to do. So the core of what we're going to talk about is okay, where is your audience? How can you connect with them? What's your differentiator? Why is your film special and meaningful to them? I think that if filmmakers can go into their films thinking that versus just we have to make a film, and I know that that's like another layer of things you have to do as a producer, but that's just what you have to do these days. But you should really start, with that audience in mind and build it out from there.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because especially, either people starting off or indie people, they are, I always call it the triple threat. You're like the writer, director, producer. And you very much have to clearly delineate those roles and say, okay, all I'm doing right now is writing the script. Like, I'm not worried about, can I afford it or whatever? Sometimes that is helpful. Let's not have a huge, robots fighting in the sky when we have a zero budget. But you have to just I'm writing, that's what I'm doing. And then you have to say, okay, I'm the director now. What's the vision? Who am I going to get? Where are we going to film? And then you very clearly have to have the producer hat of how can we afford this? Who do we know? What can we do? But part of that, though, is seeing beyond, as we were talking about at the beginning, a lot of people get stuck in pre-production or production, and they don't think about post or delivery at all.
Yeah.
And so it's very helpful sometimes to, if nothing else, say, okay, pre-production, production. I don't know if people still use index cards or whatever, but that's my era when I grew up. So it's card. What does distribution look like? What are our options? Do we have a goal? Even if we don't hit the goal, do we have a contingency? A lot of times, and especially with shorts or you have music videos or spec commercials, all that kind of stuff, people go, hey, we're done, what do we do with it?
Yeah.
And so I'm really glad you mentioned that, because it's really important, if nothing else, to just ask the question and say, hey, before we finish this, even if we don't know before we start, let's just keep asking in process, so that maybe we figure the answer out, at least because it's an ongoing discussion. So that we don't at the end go, oh, I don't know. I don't know either.
You can't do that.
No.
I would like to expand on that if you're okay with that. I always ask the filmmakers that I work with, what are your goals? And some of those goals can be financial. We need to make our money back. We need to pay our investors back. The other goal sometimes is I want to get my artistic vision out into the world. I want to make a statement and I want to change the world. Another one is I just want to make a film and establish some credibility. So I think that, knowing what your goals are when you go into making and releasing your film can help you reverse engineer some of those. Of course, everybody wants to make money on their film. Everybody does. Everybody wants to put that, investment out in the world and see it come back tenfold. The reality is that most times independent films don't make money. that's very challenging. And that makes it challenging to find investors who I think know that, there may not get any of that money back. So as a filmmaker, as you're building out your film and as you're putting together your financing, you need to see what other things that you can offer in terms of incentives. So the example I give is, are you working with a tax credit? Are you going to be filming in an area, like Washington State, where I think the rebate is like 50% or somewhere else? I know Los Angeles is trying to do some independent film tax credits, but from what I've seen, most of those credits are going to larger production companies like A24 and Neon with sort of like named directors attached. So the smaller directors aren't necessarily going to get a bite at that apple. The other thing that you could also look at doing in terms of putting your film together are doing brand partnerships. We managed to get our entire catering budget covered for our film because we partnered with a company out here through a partnership of mine. That's huge for 3 weeks. For a cast and crew of like 30 or 40 people, that was a huge chunk of our budget. And we paid that back to them in spades, in terms of support on social media, listing in all of our advertising, all of our email blasts. Our email list is over 5,000 people. We've got, a social media following of several thousand. We put them in the credits. We gave them shout outs anytime that we did a Q&A in front of a packed house. So we made sure that they were able to get that back, not in a monetary sense, but they got that back in terms of ad revenue. So if you can think of creative partnerships like that, to help put your budget together, because also that's going to help you down the road too. Once you establish those partnerships, they're going to want to amplify your project on their platforms. So if you have, brand partnerships like that, and they've got followings of, 10, 15, 20,000, whatever, they're going to mention that they supported your film. Well, that only looks good for you too. So think creatively, think strategically, and think beyond just like, what does it mean to get money? Because that may not be the thing that ends up getting your movie made.
Really good points. And this brings up another like old adage, which is like, it's called show business, not show friends. And of course, you make friendships in the business, but it's a business. Like you said at the beginning, every film is its own like company launch. And it's really helpful to sometimes shift. I mean, as much as we all want to be auteurs and artists, and that's one of the things I love so much about filmmaking is it's such a smashing together of the art and the science. And you need those like type A people who are like organized and on time and everything. And you also need the people who are like, I'm just going to create this thing that's never existed and no one's ever seen before. I heard someone talk about like in music, they're like, no one knew that they needed a Jimi Hendrix until Jimi Hendrix appeared one day. And then we were all like, yes, I need this. So you have to have those people that come in that want to do something new and daring, but they have to work with the people like a good cinematographer who's like, I know how to get the thing you want. And similarly, it's looking at some of these things in like, there's always a cost to pay. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's time, sometimes it's energy. So I'm really glad you brought that up and like looking at other ways, because what you just said, especially around tax credits or what have you, and I work with a lot of indie, low budget, no budget filmmaker people. And quite often when they hear like, ultra low budget, that's like 1 to 5 million. They're like, my ultra low budget is like 10 grand,
Yeah,
So it can't help though to think in terms of, well, if I can get a partner on board where they're going to get a 50% tax rebate, it might be worth to 10x my budget because I can get so much more on board than if I try to just like do it by the skin of the teeth. And it's bringing people in like yourself who say, well, here's how you do that, instead of just assuming that you can't and then you don't pursue it. So I'm really glad that you're talking about some of that stuff. Let's shift a little bit and have you talk about how you went from, because you said you were like, doing all this for your film, and then like people were kind of noticing. So how did you go from, so it sounds like you were like acting and in school, and then you like made this feature, and then the PR firm kind of birthed from that. Is that right?
You're missing 20 years between.
Well, let's dive into it.
You're missing 20 years.
Yes.
I mean, it takes forever to get things made. And one of my favorite sayings, favorite proverbs is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So, I mean, that also goes to say like, how long it takes for things to get made and get done, but also that it's never too late. You don't have to, just because you didn't do it 20 years ago doesn't mean that you can't start today. No, so for the 20 years before I got to where I am now, I hacked away, working as a PR and marketing professional. I worked at Fortune 50 companies. I worked at, mom and pop shops. I worked at startups. I worked as a creative director, as a marketing director, and as a consultant. All the while I was continuing to create and write. And I went through UCLA Extension's screenwriting program. My script actually won their competition in 2018, and it got me signed with my first reps. Because I'm a screenwriter at heart. Like that's what I take my most extreme joy in doing is writing. I love that. I actually am in development for 2 paid scripts right now. I'm signing a development deal with a producer this week to work on another idea. And I'm developing some short stories with my management team to take out, all the while doing all of these other things. So yes, you have to wear like many, many hats because something has to pay the bills as well. So you have to just stay busy in many, many areas. And again, this is why I say you will use everything that you have learned. Like there's no amount of skill set that you can have that will not be of interest. I'm sure that a number of your listeners are writers, and maybe they've taken a general meeting, maybe they haven't taken a general meeting, but I'm going to just touch on this very quickly. When you go into a general, you're essentially meeting with a development exec at a studio or a production company, and one of the questions that you'll get asked is, what do you uniquely bring to the table? And that is a question that is designed to trip people up, because you're like, you just very much get put on the spot. Like, well, I don't know, what do I uniquely bring to the table? And that could be one of those random little skill sets that you have learned. Like for instance, I am an expert in gemology. I had a client who worked solely in diamonds and gemstones. I know, like, anytime that I need to write a heist movie, I know exactly how to handle those gemstones so they don't scratch together. It's the same type of people who are like, well, my day job was as an ER doctor. And this is how they staff a lot of those shows, because they actually need people who know the clinical terms and those types of things. So again, I say don't ever discount the work that you're doing to get you to the point where you need to go, because you have no idea at what point you may fall back on it, and it may be literally the thing that you need to make that extra push. It's very interesting to me.
Sorry to stop the show, but we've got some bills to pay around here, and to do that, I wanted to point out a couple things I've got on offer at shaneborza.com. As both a master-level mental health coach and an award-winning filmmaker, I have the experience and expertise to help you go further faster, regardless of whether that is in your production or life. I am psyched to announce all my courses and books have been updated and expanded and are available on both Apple Books and at my shop. Especially wanted to point out my film notes book and workbook, where you can learn everything you need to make your film and get it out to the world. If you need help with either your life or film, please reach out. And now, back to the show. So to people that don't know, and I love that you just focused on that. Like, I'm a screenwriter. That's what I do,
I love that. I mean, I love that. That's what I do.
So, right, and this ties back to what you're talking earlier about, like, day jobs. So I'm a mental health coach. Like, that's what I do. And then, but I have this through line of like 20 years in the film industry. And so it's using a lot of the skill sets that we have, like you mentioned, that we pick up along the way, or using those views, or like I had this client, like, this is an amazing story. Like, that fuels all of these, because really you're in filmmaking, you're a storyteller in whatever way. And it's noticing and kind of like, to use your analogy of the gems, like polishing these things and like seeing the potential, being able to recognize it. But the really hard thing is shuttling it all the way through. And a quick story from when I was in film school, we had this great producing teacher, and I can't remember what it's called. There's a really huge short film festival in Australia every year. And we were kind of watching at the school, like the live award show. And somebody won, and they showed the film, and it was almost universally panned in the school, like in the live audience of film students. Everyone was like, this is terrible. And this one student said to the producing teacher, like, how did they win? I'll never forget this. He goes, They won because they finished the film and submitted it. And your film, no matter how good it is unfinished on a hard drive in this school, and no one has seen it. And it was a very powerful and long-serving lesson, which is there's so many talented people out there, and for whatever reason, they put something down and they don't pick it back up again. So it's being able to, again, see like, where are we going with this? What do we want to do? Let's maybe look at some of the stumbling blocks before we even start, so we can make sure, if nothing else, we have a plan so that it goes, you know, I thought this might happen. I'm prepared, not, oh no, I didn't have any idea something like this would happen. I don't know what to do. Stop.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned like just having something sit on a drive and, you know, not get out into the world. When you release something, and I love that you mentioned that you're a mental health coach, because I imagine you deal with getting over fears and phobias and sort of mental blocks quite a bit with your clients. When you put something out in the world, you're opening yourself up to be vulnerable and be judged. And it's really unfair that the bulk of people who are consuming films and reviewing films and judging films don't know what went into making the film. They have no idea, you know. I had to scrub toilets on my set because I couldn't afford a cleaning team. And we were at a private residence. Someone had to do that. They have no idea that maybe this scene was cut short because, you know, we were filming under very strict COVID regulations. And we were at a location where the owner of the location was throwing a fit and, you know, stealing our COVID tests and our catering. And we had to get out of the property because we didn't feel safe. None of that stuff makes it onto the screen. So that's why I think filmmaker interviews and talkbacks and things like that are really important, because it shows what goes into making a film. But I do think that when you put something out into the world with your name on it, you are inherently opening yourself up to be judged. And I think for a lot of people, it's much easier to sit back and say, well, I haven't quite reached my potential. You know, I'm getting there, that I haven't quite done it. I haven't quite made that push. I was absolutely terrified to go ahead and put the final push on our film and to get it out into the world and to start screening it, because that meant that like that thing, that baby, good, bad, or ugly, was mine forever. And it is always going to be associated with me. But that's a really interesting point that I haven't actually really talked about in any other interview that I've given. But yeah, I think a lot of people do tend to be scared, not only of, you know, if they don't make something, but what if they make something? Like what does happen on the other end of that? And the reality is you don't know. It may not go the way that you want it to go, but you can't stay stasis. You have to keep moving. That's a very good question.
And what you said is so true, because a lot of people unfortunately do get stuck in like those what ifs. And then they kind of, you know, people talk about fight or flight and they forget about the freeze.
Yes.
A lot of people, they just get stuck. And there's a time and a place to like slow down and stop or step back and like think and reflect and review. But there's also a time and a place to just be kind of like, well, we're just gonna like hit the gas and go. And where are we going? I'm not sure, but we're going somewhere. We'll figure it out. You know, entrepreneurially, people now talk about like they're building the plane in the air, and that can be dangerous, but can also be really exciting. You know, but what you said is, you know, a lot of people, we're being very naked, like we're putting ourselves out there, and we have to sometimes again think about that. Like, well, what's it going to be like if I'm out on the red carpet, or we're at a local film festival this week, and we're there last night, and they were doing a Q&A, and you could tell that some of the people were like, I'm standing up here in front of the lights, and like everyone in this theater is looking at me. Oh no! But that's so great, because it shows like you finished the project, you submitted it, it got picked up, and now you have to like figure out, how am I gonna do like with the lights on me? And hopefully they'll have a long run, and at the end of a lot of those experiences, they'll have learned how to kind of do that. But I also saw, because it was a short film block, so there was 4 films, you also had the people who were like, oh, I've done this before. Let me tell you, like, And it was fascinating to see, and my wife and I were talking about this, like, it's such an equalizing stage in a way, because you literally have the person who's like, I used to be in Nickelodeon, and my checks are what funded this film project that I'm now a director on, who's been in the industry for like 20 years, next to a first-time filmmaker, and they were standing next to each other. And I was like, oh, like, this is literally like what it's all about. And we're all in this theater seeing these two ends of the spectrum of experience and comfort and like belief and like all these things, and yet they're both in the same room. We both watch their movies, and there they are. So it's so great to see, and it's so much a proof of how, if you have that stick-to-itiveness or that drive or that belief or whatever, or even if it ebbs and flows, if you just kind of keep going, you can get yourself, out to your point earlier, whatever the venue is, which for us was like seeing it at this festival.
I love the idea of, just taking a risk, but also a lot of filmmakers may ask themselves, if I'm not going to make my money back, if I'm not going to, make my investors, like, why bother? Why should I do this? Well, I can tell you firsthand that having made a film versus having not made a film, it is a world apart. And I have a knowledge base now that I didn't have. And I am a filmmaker now. I have a feature film. I have a feature film that is, that had a theatrical run. It is the difference between, like you said, letting it sit on your hard drive. But I do think that, even if you may not make your money back on it, you then get put into a different classification of filmmaker. You are not somebody who's just sitting around dreaming or trying to put something together. It is done. It exists into the world. And there's an intangible benefit that goes along with that, because you like you said, I mean, you are with the people who have done the thing versus the people who have not done the thing. So it's an interesting dichotomy. And for that end, I would say, for anybody that is considering to make a film that may not see a financial return on it, go for it anyways. Not only because you'll be doing it for yourself, but because I fully believe that there's a difference between art and commerce. And I agree, they need to exist, but not every movie can be a $200 million movie. And that doesn't serve all of these, niche voices and underrepresented voices, these stories that deserve to be told. Excuse me, that was terrible English. That was terrible. To tell the stories that deserve to be told. And independent film is the mechanism in which those stories do get told. So to that end, I would say it is extremely important, and that's vital, actually, that filmmakers continue to push and move forward.
It reminds me of the Dogma 95 push back in the day, where it's like, let's embrace these limitations and just say, we're just going to focus on having like the best story possible and not worry about, we don't have the money for this, that, or the other thing. And so sometimes it is, I mean, the big movies, they have the spectacle. They have everything you could ever possibly want, everything shiny and amazing. But it is quite often those quiet indie little gems that you remember forever.
Yeah.
Because the characters were so good, or the writing was so good, or the dialogue was so good, or whatever. And I had a writing teacher say once, the best dialogue ever really just matters on, did you have a good writer and did you have a good person saying it? And that's all it needs. I mean, hopefully it's shot well and it needs to sound good, but they could be sitting in a car, or they could be, spacewalking, but it's still just a good line said well by a good actor.
Yeah.
And that is something I think that, to go back to the beginning, is like, we have to start with really good stories and really good ideas. And then we have to find people to go, here's what I have a vision. Here's what I need to do. Avengers Assemble. Like, how can we get a team to make this happen? Because that's the other thing that's so great about filmmaking. It's a cooperative, collaborative medium. And it's not just you're looking at things, you're hearing things, but it's also all these different departments working together.
Yeah.
And to tie it a little bit more into, again, what you do, this is the difference, I think, between people who just make a great movie and people who have like a big splash, is they need people to go, here's how you get people to find out about it. Here's how you get it places. Here's how people see it. Here's how you get it into festivals. Here's how you get a theatrical run. Here's how you get awards. There's a whole, people I know watch the Emmys and the Oscars and stuff. There's a whole industry just behind like
Awards.
pitching and all of that.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of those behind the scenes things are. So let's pivot a little bit and talk to me, like, what does your firm do? How can people like benefit from someone like yourself? You're like, hey, I'm a filmmaker, I have a film, you know, pitch me. Like, what would you say? How do you kind of onboard people or tell them what you do for them and their projects?
I work with filmmakers in a variety of capacities. Most of the time people find me either via referral or via my Substack, which is KLA Media. Actually, it's called Marketing and PR for Independent Films, Creatives, and Small Businesses. I intentionally made it very keyword friendly, just so there was no confusion about what it was. But I write on that Substack. I write 4 times a month. I do 3 paid posts and then 1 public post. And as you and I talked about earlier, Shane, Substack has become such a huge film community. Ted Hope is on there. And if you're not familiar with Ted Hope, Ted is a legendary producer with Amazon. He ran Amazon Independent, but he runs Hope for Film. He actually follows my Substack, which is incredible. I have been quoted in IndieWire now twice from my advice. And just last week, my business was, I would say last week, it is June, and when we were filming this, but my business was quoted as being, one of the top rising 100 on the platform. But I touch on a number of things for the filmmaker, just depending on what they need. I'm working with one client right now who is sort of stuck in the distribution process. I just signed an amazing documentary, which you're going to hear about. But we're putting together a limited theatrical run. I'm helping them with the theatrical because I've done that. So I've booked the theaters and I'm helping them with that. But I'm also helping them with their public relations and their audience building. So we're putting together some announcements. We're figuring out how to, ideally release their trailer, what outlets we're getting that for. So basically what I do is I work with my clients depending on where they're at in their process and what they need, and we'll craft an individual plan and then work backwards from that. So again, people can hire me on a one-off consultation basis. They can hire me for like kind of a pared down, I just need press around this particular film, or I really want to engage with you very long-term, in depth for a number of months, which is what I'm doing with this particular documentary. So it varies. I sort of piecemeal my service offerings in a variety of different areas. Brand partnerships, digital strategy, audience building, message platforming, basically whatever you would need. It's a one-stop shop.
I always encourage people, if they've never thought about some of these things, because I have a wide variety of people. Like, I have actors on, I have cinematographers on, I have editors on, I have sound designers on, and sometimes people have never worked with someone like that, or they've never thought about working with, like, well, I can hold a boom mic, or I can do the audio levels myself. And you're like, well, I mean, maybe.
Yeah, but
but you can learn a lot about talking to these kind of people. And that's why I like to have people come in on the show, because it gives people a chance to, like, once removed, say like, oh, I didn't realize until I heard them talk about the thing they do that I might need that thing. I should probably talk to someone like that.
Yeah. I mean, you like to say, what note would I give to people, so what I would tell people is, if you're going to be putting together a film, start building your audience as you're building out your production. You definitely want to secure your social media handles. You want to secure, a URL, because those things are very important. You cannot rely on just media and press alone to sustain your film. Because if you think about it, a lot of filmmakers think that just getting a mention in the trades is it. Like, that's the gold standard. I hate to break it to you, but audience members are not looking for your film in the trades. That's not how they're going to find out about you. It's great to have, but it's not the only thing that you should have. So it's really important to sort of build out this multi-pronged, attack or plan in order to go ahead and give yourself a full 360-degree plan so you can succeed. And that's what I help people do.
I'm glad you usurped me a little bit and got into the film notes portion, because that is one of those things that I love to make sure I do, is say, hey, you're an expert in X, Y, and Z. Like, what would you feature or showcase or tell people? So you're here in a couple different capacities, screenwriting, filmmaking, PR and marketing. So what might be some other notes, either from those different hats or even just additional notes to the one you just said?
I very much encourage filmmakers to learn as much about the distribution landscape as possible. Even so much up as until last year, SVOD deals were still being handed out. And for those who don't know, those are streaming video on demand deals that are passed out by platforms like Starz or Hulu or Netflix or something like that. But those deals have gone down tremendously in the last few years. And I've been hearing basically the thing that's being offered are things like, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 to tie your rights up for 3, 4, 5 years. Is that worth it to you? That means you can't then put your film out on other platforms. So you really have to think about, like, what are your goals? Is it to say, oh, I got X on this platform, but then maybe no one's watching it. If your goal is to say, oh, I really want to, I want to blow up on AVOD, and that's advertising video on demand. So that's your Plexes, your Tubies, your Plutos, even YouTube. Think about that. So learn as much as you can about the current distribution landscape, so that way you can plan to work your way towards it. And if you need resources on that, I do a weekly newsletter where I list out all the things that I'm reading, which I think people sometimes just follow the newsletter just for the list of these resources that I put together. But I do tend to try and stay abreast of everything that's happening in terms of the distribution landscape, because it affects everything from the way down.
Great notes. And again, I think a lot of this is stuff that people don't know. It's a little like inside baseball for people. But, so if you're just like, hey, I'm interested in beginning the film industry, this might be a little like 2 or 3 layers deep. But it's really helpful, especially if people are kind of in that middle place, like, hey, I've done a couple shorts, or I'm thinking of doing my first feature, or I'm trying to finish my first feature. Those are the types of people I think really benefit from this kind of talk, so they can kind of go, oh, I never even thought about any of this stuff. I might really need to kind of educate myself and set myself up for success, because sometimes this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, we do limit ourselves and be like, all I want to do is finish the movie. You're like, really? Is that all you want to do? Or do you want to maybe do a little more than that? You're like, let's maybe expand the horizons. But that is parallel. We were talking about sometimes like what the cost is and how it's not just money, it's this, it's that, but it's also like, what's the benefit? Because like you were saying, like, sometimes the benefit is people watched your film and were inspired to go do something. Sometimes the benefit is you made money so you can make another movie. There's a lot of different ways to have benefits from these things, but really it's like, our movies are like our kids. And really, it's like, we want our kids to have as many options as possible. Like, we want our films to have as many options as possible. So let's set ourselves up for that. Now, I want to make sure we're spotlighting, and we talked about your firm, but also your film. So where can people connect with you, your Substack, your firm, see the movie, like whether it's social media or websites or whatever? Like, tell us all the things.
Sure. So my film is called Daruma, Daruma, and it is about a paraplegic man who discovers he has a daughter from a forgotten fling, and then he must take her and learn how to parent her very quickly. But he decides that he can't do that. So he goes on a cross-country road trip with his cantankerous neighbor to take her to live with her maternal grandparents. So it's a found family dramedy road trip. Again, Oscar winner Peter Farrelly of Dumb and Dumber is our executive producer. Peter is an incredible supporter, mentor, and advocate. He's wonderful. Again, we only connected with him because we were doing the work. So do the work. You have no idea who you're going to connect with. But the film is currently in its TVOD window, which is, again, transactional video on demand. It is available on a variety of platforms like Amazon Prime, Apple TV Plus. We should be moving into our AVOD phase very soon, which, again, that's their Tubi, your Plutos, things like that. But you can find it there.
And now here's an exclusive trailer for Daruma.
That's my dad's watch.
And now it's mine.
What the hell is wrong with you? Mind your own damn business.
You're gonna pay for my car.
You can believe whatever you want.
I'm sorry, but I can't give you an advance on your disability payment.
You're gonna have to press enter and give me the money I need.
I'm gonna enter you behind out this door.
Are you familiar with a woman named Heather Parks?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Miss Parks stated in her will that she wants you to be the beneficiary of her life insurance policy until Camilla comes of age.
Who the hell's Camilla?
She's your daughter.
You said there's money?
What do you want?
Cereal.
Hey! You just told me you were potty trained.
So how is it? You look a little out of your depth.
I found her playing in the street.
Get in here!
You're not fit to be a parent.
She either goes to live with her grandparents in Providence or she goes into foster care.
I don't have anyone else.
You can't just take off for a road trip for several weeks. Ask someone else.
I'm gonna drive like a grandpa the entire trip.
If it pisses you off, then yes.
You think this is the wrong decision, just say it.
She's the best thing that's ever gonna happen to you.
Oh, good shot. All right, here we go. Ready?
That tattoo on your back, what is it?
A Daruma doll? You make a wish, color in one eye, and color in the other eye when the wish comes true.
What'd you wish for?
Had my ear to the ground.
Stop, hey, stop it.
Just let her do it.
She's my daughter. Not for long.
Even though it's completely selfish, at least you are doing the right thing for once. For her sake.
You deserve more than what I can give you.
But I love you, Daddy.
You just don't walk away from love like that.
You said that when you let people into your life, you get hurt. You don't think about what you do to other people.
You hide in that chair. You can't fix that, but you can fix this.
What's wrong, Daddy?
I'm afraid of what she'll become if she stays with me.
Father's and daughter. Nothing like it in the whole world.
Our social media, is Daruma Movie. We've got all the platforms, taken out for that particular film. Yeah, and if you want to connect with me, I do public speaking events sometimes. I've been on Gotham Film Week. I've been on panels at SIE Society. I had Amazon MGM invite me to a panel to speak. So again, the work you do can take you places you have no idea that we're gonna lead you. Like you have no idea. So those things only came about because I did it. I did the thing and people saw it. So again, you have no idea who's watching. But if you want to connect with me, my website is klamediagroup.com. I'm on Substack under KLA Media Group. I highly encourage you to sign up at least for the free version of my newsletter because you're going to get weekly insights delivered directly into your inbox at no cost. And it's a community. I'm telling you, join the FilmStack, Substack community. I would love to see you on there, Shane. And I don't work for Substack. So.
Well, and that was it's so funny that you're bringing it back because I was like, before we started rolling, you mentioned that. And I was like, I'm writing that down. That's going to be homework for me to do is look into that.
Yeah, I guarantee you're going to find an ecosystem and a community. And I think it's great. Like, you have a podcast. I think I found you via LinkedIn or something like that. You came across it via mutual connection. I was like, I need to know this guy. So that's why I reached out. But again, it was in that ecosystem. And this particular ecosystem just happens to be very much like-minded people connecting with each other. And, I don't think that that's what the platform was intended for, but it's funny how things adapt and evolve. And that's what it's become. So I hope to see you all on there.
That I think is another great kind of maybe a final note is we do have to be flexible because sometimes we do have an image or a picture of like what things will be. And sometimes we have to put our foot down and be like, nope, I'm fighting for this is the hill I'm going to die on. Like, no matter what, it has to be this way. Or I heard a great piece of advice on set once and they said the best idea wins. I don't care who has it, but someone has to be the one who says it's that idea. That's the best idea. And
That's
sometimes,
the director, I think.
yeah. So we do have to be flexible along the way, though, and be like, hey, Substack wasn't designed to be this, but it is this. So let's jump on board and maybe allow ourselves to, social media evolves and the way we watch movies evolves. And it's like, but they're still making movies,
I will end this on a humorous note, Shane, because I know you said you have to jump at a certain point, but you'd mentioned my husband and I work together. We are producing partners. We are business partners. He is a very accomplished cinematographer and director. And he and I got married a while ago, and his parents are both paleoanthropologists, and they've excavated numerous dig sites together and worked together for a number of years. And his dad gave him some marriage advice, because they worked together. His mom and dad worked together, and he said, "Let me give you some advice. Here's what it's like working with your spouse. When we're on my side of the volcano, I'm the boss. We're on her side of the volcano, she's the boss." So we have very much put that into our working relationship and our marriage, and that he has a very, specific and particular set of skills that I don't have. And I have skills and things, I can do things that he can't do. So our Venn diagram overlaps very nicely. But when there's an area that he is the expert in, he has the final say. And when there's an area that I have the expert in, I have the final say. So I think sort of knowing your lane and compromise too is a good takeaway for anybody that's trying to get into this business.
Well, I'm glad you threw that in, because I too, my wife is my producing partner. Been married for 10 years, together for 13, but every single project we've done has been together because our lenses are so different and so complementary.
Yep.
And we have to allow sometimes that other voice to go, you know what, they're right.
Yes. Yeah. For the sake of your film and your marriage.
Exactly. Well, I want to thank you so much for being here. It was lovely to hear a little bit more just about you as a person, but also your career. And you had so many great notes. So thank you for sharing all that. And for everyone watching, I like to remind everyone, this is a podcast you can listen to, but it's also a show on YouTube. And especially, we're talking about filmmaking. I always encourage people, watch the show. You not only get to see the speaker, but when they're talking about their film, like the poster goes up. When they're talking about their socials, like I put the screenshot up, you can see the link. Like it's really helpful sometimes to watch these things. So please go to my YouTube and support the show there. You can also support me on Patreon if you'd like to help me make more episodes. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you on the next one.
Lovely.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the link below. You can also contact me at my website if you have any questions about filmmaking or anything else. Off to the side, you'll see a couple of my books, Film Notes and the Film Notes Workbook. I encourage you to check those out if you'd like to learn more about filmmaking. See you in the next episode.
Scene 1, Apple, take 1.